Have you been hesitant about buying a half beef direct from a ranch because you don't feel like you can justify the price? After all, going to the grocery store does seem like a less expensive option, but are you aware of all the hidden costs when you're buying from the store? Well, in the next few minutes, I'm going to give you the confidence to buy grass-fed beef direct from the ranch and never look back. Like many moms trying to do what is best for their family, you might not realize that only focusing on the final price of a half beef may actually be costing you more money in the long run. Additionally, it's also allowing you to accept that quality is secondary to price. Without even realizing it, you've been steered through a thought process with your previous purchasing patterns. When you buy a half beef from a local ranch, you're focusing on quality and value. But before I show you how the grocery stores are doing the opposite of that, allow me to introduce myself. I'm Arlen Hill, a health-focused regenerative rancher that helps conscious consumers find confidence in the animal-based food choices they are making starting today. We've all seen the signs that says, buy wholesale, buy direct, and you'll save. And many times you do. But why is it that when we see these same types of signs or same types of indicators related to buying beef direct, that we don't have the same thought? It doesn't translate the same way that there's inherently going to be savings and value there, because there actually is. So let's reconsider the cost of buying from the grocery store and put that against the cost of buying direct and give you the full perspective here. So a couple of things on this. It's when you're looking at buying from the grocery store, one of the things that you have to consider, and this goes across the board really with almost anything you buy, is that it's never just the cost of the item you're buying. So when you're buying meat at the grocery store, the cost of that meat is not actually just the meat. There's other costs that are built into that are part of the process of getting that meat to you at the store. So that's what you're taught to think, is that it's only the price of the meat right there in front of you, right? There's nothing else to consider in that. That's where the first mistake comes in here, because it teaches you to overlook these hidden costs. Well, what are these hidden costs? Well, for you, there's the cost of transportation and fuel. After all, you've got to go to the grocery store and get that meat. And you may think that that's petty, but ask yourself, when you look at any company and they're looking at their bottom line, do companies consider transportation as an expense, as a cost, something that they have to factor in and account for? Of course they do. So if they're managing that on their bottom line, why aren't you factoring that in and managing that on your bottom line? There's also the cost of the time spent shopping. You have additional costs. For example, going through the store, when you've all been through the grocery store or any retail location, and many times you'll find that you're getting upsold without even realizing it. And by the time you get to checkout, you've got things in your basket that maybe you're not even sure why they're in there, right? So there's that cost of getting marketed to as you're going through the shopping experience. And then you have the intangibles that a lot of times get overlooked as well by just looking at focusing on price. For example, things like the absence of nutrients, what's not in that product that inherently should be in that product. There's the cost of peace of mind. Am I getting what I think I'm really getting? I'm not sure, because I'm not sure who I'm getting it from, right? So there's the cost of peace of mind. And then there's the cost of convenience and availability. So what I'd like to do for you as we continue forward is go through an individual cost breakdown here and give some rough estimates to illustrate my points. And I'm also going to give an idea of what each of those items that I just mentioned might cost and how that could be added to your bottom line that you're not factoring in, and how then you should compare that against the cost of buying direct. So let's go through each one of these, and this will make more sense as I continue on. So what about the cost of transportation here? Well, transportation and fuel are one of the most significant costs across the board in any industry. And so I'm just going to use an average here, and I'm going to give you two scenarios. So for me, I live about 15 miles from the closest grocery store. But you may be saying, well, the grocery store is right around the corner from me, because when I used to live in the Houston area, I had a grocery store that was probably half a mile from me. But you know what the irony of that is? Is that it took me just as long to get to that grocery store and to navigate a parking spot and to get in there and to do anything I needed to do in that grocery store as it does for me living in a more rural area now to go 15 miles away. So regardless, you're looking at, and if I think about driving that 15 miles and then coming back, or if I think about the time that it spent me to drive prior and then go back home, that's probably using about 2 gallons of gas to do that. Now, you can argue about more economical vehicles and all that. This is just an example, okay? But let's say for that 2 gallons of gas, we're at $2.50 a gallon right now. So that would be, if you're doubling that, 2 gallons, that's about $5 a trip. So that's going to add $5 to the base cost of whatever you're buying in terms of the meat you're looking at. And we're going to focus on meat. So I'm going to start us out here with a $5 per pound ground beef, right? And let's say you eat that 4 days per week, and you look at the cost of fuel added to that on that one trip to the store per week. Well, in reality, you're coming up with a $6.25 cost. That's your real cost, because all you saw at the store was the initial $5 per pound. You didn't factor the cost of the fuel that it took to get you there to get that. Okay, so that's the first cost. Well, another cost is the time spent shopping. And let's say that very conservatively that your time is worth $20 per hour. Now, I'm being very conservative here. Your time is worth far more than $20 per hour, which is actually going to make this price go up. But I'm being conservative here, so take that for what it's worth. So if you spent 30 minutes to shop per week, right? So you got the time that it took you to get there. You got the time that you're actually purchasing or buying decisions. Let's just say that averages out to about $10 per trip is what that's costing you. So $20, 30 minutes, so half of that's going to be $10. So now you average that into that cost of the ground beef. And remember, we were at $6.25 when we factored in the fuel costs. Well, now if we add in the time spent shopping, that's going to get us up to $7.75 per pound. That ground beef, that conventionally raised ground beef, starting to already not look too ideal. Well, what about the cost of upsells, right? There's other costs built in here as well. For example, you're going to be going through the store, you're going to see condiments, you're going to see seasonings that you want, and there's going to be, maybe you're going to think about, oh, well, I need some sides, and there's some sides that I might not otherwise purchase. And so I'm going to say by the time you get done factoring all those things in, you've probably at least added another $1 to the cost of that ground beef. Where you spent money on things that maybe you wouldn't have otherwise spent that if you hadn't been enticed by what you were seeing in the store. So now we're up to $8.75 per pound of ground beef. Well, what about those intangible costs that I mentioned a bit earlier? The absence of nutrients is one example. So when you're foregoing direct grass-fed beef for conventional beef, you're missing out on omega-3s. So that means we need to replace those. Well, let's just say that now a good quality omega-3, those are about $60 a bottle. You're missing out on minerals. Well, minerals are going to run you about good quality here, about $40 a bottle. And what about all the secondary compounds, the antioxidative compounds, what really makes grass-fed beef so superior? Well, that's probably going to at least run you $50 a bottle, and I'm being probably overly conservative on that. So we've got $150 total there. And keep in mind that supplements, even though we're factoring in replacing those nutrients with supplements still will not equate to what you inherently find in the food. You're still not going to get as complete array of nutrients through the supplementation as what you're going to get in that grass-fed beef. So by the time you factor all that in, And you take a half cow weight, which is going to be about 150 to 200 pounds, depending on where you source it from. You're looking at roughly about $1 of supplements per pound of beef, right? So I said $150 total to replace those nutrients. And so let's just take the 150 pound half beef. So that's about $1 per pound. And so now we're already up to $9.75 on the cost of that beef because of all these hidden costs. And we're not even done yet. So let me ask you, are you finding this information helpful? Is this giving you a different perspective on what the real costs are when you go to the grocery store and buy that $5 pound of ground beef? I hope it is. And if it is, go ahead and hit that like and subscribe button so you can help me get this information out there to other individuals so they can make an honest assessment of their beef buying decisions as well. Now, another is going to be the cost of convenience and availability. And is it readily available when you need it? Well, when you go to your freezer, if you've bought direct, you know what's in your freezer. You know you have availability for it, of it, and that may not be the case when you go to the grocery store. They may be sold out of the cuts you want. You may have to default over to something else. You may be forced to buy a higher price cut than what you wanted. So when you look at this, you regain a lot of efficiency when you're buying direct because you know what you already have versus not knowing when you're at the grocery store or not knowing what's going to be there. You're not calling ahead to see what they have on the shelf. So it just makes your planning a lot easier knowing what you already have available. So here's the question. What's that efficiency and knowledge worth for you? Well, I'm going to, again, be ridiculously conservative on this, and I'm going to say 50 cents per pound. I don't think any of you are going to push back on me on that because you appreciate that. That's an extremely low number for what that efficiency probably really correlates to. So now if you're keeping track here, we were at $9.75 per pound. Now we're up to $10.25 per pound. But we're not done. But if you already see the value in locally raised beef, buying that direct, go ahead and visit harvesthillsranch.com and select a half cow that you can trust. There's even a special gift if you're a first-time purchaser when you buy a whole or a half cow. So again, go to harvesthillsranch.com and check that out. Now, what about the cost of peace of mind? Guys, this may be absolutely the most important. You want confidence in what you are sitting down and consuming. So let me give you another example of another aspect of your life where you do this. When you pay for insurance above the minimum requirements, why do you do that? Well, you do that because it takes away uncertainty. You know what the outcome is going to be if things go wrong and things happen. So just like when you sit down to eat beef, when you buy direct, it takes away the uncertainty of knowing where that's coming from, how it was raised, what nutrients are in it. You're going to have a much better understanding of all of those things. So it creates certainty versus putting you in a position of uncertainty. So again, where was that meat raised at? Is it, and this is probably one that you don't think about a lot of times, but this is one you definitely need to think about. Was that a foreign raised meat or was it an American raised meat? Well, if you're buying direct, it's American raised. If you're just going and buying over the counter, could be foreign raised regardless of what that USDA inspection sticker says. So you don't really know. How many miles did your beef travel? Do you have the presence of different microbes? So conventionally raised beef because of the changes in the rumen, that animal does have an increased propensity for exposure to E. coli. So those are all things that you have to consider. So that all affects your peace of mind. And all of these are underperceived values that are very much overlooked. Can you really put a price on things like that? Well, I'm going to try here, and let's say $2 a pound on that. So now we were at $10.25 a pound, and we add that $2, we're up to $12.25 a pound. So when you look at all things being considered, you're potentially, and remember, I'm estimating towards the low side here when you factor all these costs in, you're looking at $12.25 per pound. But your cost could vary based on your situation, what your value and prioritization is. But what are you actually paying for? You're paying for when you buy grass-fed beef direct, you're actually paying for two things. You're paying for trust and you're paying for transparency. And neither one of those are what you're getting for when you buy from a local grocer or when you buy from a retail outlet. You don't know anything about the transparency. You don't have any view into that, and you don't know if you can really trust what you're buying. And so if you look at the cost per pound of buying direct grass-fed versus that $12.25, well, and again, low number probably, there's really not much difference at all. Plus, that whole peace of mind just resonates so strong with me here. So rather than focus on the price per pound, you want to focus on quality and value delivered per individual in your family. Because ultimately, what you're going to see is that that's going to equate to better overall nutrition. It's going to translate to a reduction in healthcare costs, and you're going to have an overall better experience with the meat because that meat's also going to be more flavorful, and you're going to have just a better overall eating experience. Your family will appreciate it and enjoy it and not feel like they're eating some mundane meal. Now, what you might not realize from this conversation are all the ways that the food system is manipulating costs. If you would like to clearly see what is going on, join me in the video on the screen as I compare local farm versus grocery store options.